The iPhone 15 Pro series introduced USB-C on the iPhone for the first time, a 3nm A17 Pro SoC with good efficiency and performance. There was a new button, the Action button, allowing you to remap it to a pre-selected list of apps or actions, as well as anything that you can think of under the sun using the Shortcuts app. And with the 15 Pro Max, Apple included a 5x telephoto lens for the first time. It's been about 3 weeks since I picked up the iPhone 15 Pro Max since it's been released, and I've come to the conclusion that I was really hard on this device at launch. This is my deep dive, long-term review of the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And before we get into it, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated, and it really does help out a ton. We're pushing almost 40,000 subscribers, so thank you so much for the support. My journey with the 15 Pro Max hasn't really been the smoothest, and I've documented all of the problems that I've had with it on this channel, from overheating, bugs in iOS, and battery life. The unit that I have here is not the same one that I've actually used a few months back. In fact, this is actually the third 15 Pro Max that's been in my possession. From the first one being almost a complete dud, to me selling the second one after having switched to the S24 Ultra. Though I thought it was time to give the 15 Pro Max a fair shake again, because that's how we remain unbiased in this whole tech world. Anyways, the unit that I have here, according to the battery health, was manufactured in February of 2024. So this is a newer unit, and I'm currently using the iOS 18 developer beta 1, as I am just a little bit hesitant to move to the second one because I've heard there's a little bit of bugs. But how's the experience been? Surprisingly good. So I've been dailying this device since I picked it up, and I don't really have any major complaints. A lot of what I didn't like within iOS has actually improved, though if you want to hear more about my thoughts on the iOS 18 beta itself, I'll throw up a link in the video when this one's over. As for the hardware, there's a lot to like about the 15 Pro Max. Let's get the biggest thing out of the way, that 6.7-inch OLED display. I think if there's one thing that's really held up with the iPhone through the last 8 months, it'd probably have to be the display. With a near 90% screen-to-body ratio at 460 pixels per inch, this Super Retina XDR screen looks fantastic, even in environments where lighting can be a challenge, thanks to that 2000 nit peak brightness on the 15 Pro Max. Whether you're playing games or consuming content, or even just doom scrolling these days, the colors are perfect with insane contrast thanks to the OLED technology inside. Now, I'm a big fan of Samsung's displays, especially the S24 Ultra, as I am kind of a sucker for saturation. I just like things to pop a little bit more. But with the iPhone, it's a more true to life display, which would help out more if you're editing photos or videos on device. But I mean, 8 months later, I'd still take this display over a lot of what's available on the market currently. Now, this is also our second year with Dynamic Island, one of the most controversial Apple implementations in recent times, even making its way down to the base iPhone 15 this time around. And I have to say, 2 years later, I still hate this thing. Let me explain. Dynamic Island has the potential to do a lot, especially with live activities and apps that do support it, giving you real-time updates on things like your food order with Uber Eats so that you don't have to keep popping in and out of the app. But honestly, less applications support this than I would have thought by now. And it's really only found its niche in things like timers and sports scoring applications and maybe flight apps. I would say it's not something that I regularly use, which leads me into this. It's very intrusive. When watching a video on it, it cuts in. It's dead center at the top of your display at all times. For the amount of utility that it provides, dare I say that it just really isn't worth it. Obviously, one thing that it does do though is house the Face ID sensor. And man, Face ID is hands down my favorite way to unlock a device and fill in passwords and pretty much do anything that requires biometrics. After having used the S24 Ultra, using fingerprint for any secure application like banking is terrible. And if you're using a screen protector, it's even worse. So I guess going back to my point about Dynamic Island being intrusive, I guess if it's gonna keep the Face ID sensor there, for me, it's not the end of the world. But they really need to find a way to shrink that thing down. Another thing that was impressive about the iPhone 15 Pro Max though was that Apple implemented their new A17 Pro 3nm SoC inside of it. Now initially, I was excited about the implications that that would have on efficiency, but obviously that didn't really go to plan at launch, especially with all of the overheating issues. Though now that it's matured a bit and we've had a ton of iOS updates, my thoughts have kind of shifted completely. For one, this is the most powerful SoC inside of a flagship phone. Whether you're able to take advantage of it or not is dependent on how you use your device, and I would argue that this much power generally isn't needed inside of a smartphone. But what Apple's been doing recently with game studios like Ubisoft porting fully fledged AAA titles like Assassin's Creed to the iPhone, it really shows you how capable devices like the 15 Pro Max are, and for a lot of people, this may be their only way to access these kinds of video games. Now, I play a little bit of mobile games myself, and playing games like Warzone Mobile on the 15 Pro Max is a very smooth experience with high frame rates, which is also made better by the ProMotion display. I think that as a package, the A17 Pro is a very impressive SoC. And while I will talk about my experiences recently with overheating when we get back to the battery at the end of the video, I'm happy with what the 15 Pro Max is able to do in terms of performance. Now, I think that it would be weird to make a video about the 15 Pro Max and not talk about the USB-C port, because in a way, it's still shocking that Apple completely folded and implemented it on this device. Though, while I think being able to record log to an SSD is cool and definitely a useful feature, and having the ability to shoot straight to an SD card and move files to and from removable storage is great, I think that the one thing that I've liked most about having USB-C on the iPhone is just the compatibility. Look, I don't own any devices that have Lightning anymore. I mean, okay, maybe the AirPods, but these only get charged wirelessly. But I do have USB-C cables everywhere. Do you know how nice it is to hop in the car or sit at my desk or be anywhere in my house and have access to a USB-C cable if I need to top it up, rather than walking around the house like a madman looking for that stupid Lightning connector? Another benefit that USB-C has added is higher bandwidth for file transfer and the ability to charge at 27 watts. While still not the fastest or anywhere near it, it was a hefty jump from just 20 watts on the 14 Pro Max, which at times felt sluggish to charge. Though I would be lying if I said that the 15 Pro Max is speedy in the charging department, because it isn't. With the phone often taking me about 2 hours to fully charge this device from nothing. But, I mean, hopefully that's an upgrade that we'll see at the end of the year with the 16 Pro Max. God. Now, I think that smartphones have evolved into so much more, especially with the camera upgrades that we've been seeing lately, and the 15 Pro Max is no exception. People say all the time that you need to invest a lot into YouTube, especially with a camera. I use the Sony FX30, which is about a $3,000 body after taxes, but there are channels that are astronomically more successful and get away with using just an iPhone, like Spawn Point, Fernando over at 9to5Mac, Ryan Trahan, and so much more. The creator landscape has changed a lot, and unless you're trying to get up close, beauty shots of products, or trying to achieve a very niche look, the iPhone can do a lot. And like I mentioned earlier, with USB-C recording, you don't have to worry about filling up your device's storage, and you can treat it as if you're using a real camera with a real SD card or SSD for your media. The log feature on iPhone, which is new to the 15 Pro Max, is also a very flexible codec, allowing you to achieve nearly any look you're going for by allowing you to meticulously grade and color correct your footage as well. While there are cameras geared more toward content creation, like the Osmo Pocket 3, most of the time the iPhone will give you a better result despite having a smaller sensor. And for photos, the 15 Pro Max is one of my favorite devices to shoot with. Now, for the first time on an iPhone, we have a real telephoto lens, a 5x shooter capable of a 120mm focal length, which is nearly double what I'm able to achieve with my FX30. And I mean, just look at the size of that lens compared to the iPhone. The photos that come out of the iPhone are stunning though. They're sharp, they have great bokeh and subject separation, and it's also just really easy to use. I pretty much only use the iPhone as a point and shoot camera, almost never dabbling with the RAW or Pro modes, because I believe that what comes out of it natively already looks good enough to share. I've taken a ton of photos with the iPhone though, through the last 8 months, and I find that whenever this device is in my pocket, I try to shoot with it as much as I can just to see how the images turn out. It's kind of like the Pixel in that way for me, where it just makes, taking pictures and capturing scenes a lot more fun, just because of how good it actually looks on the device. And I think that if you're interested in doing anything creative, having something like that that actually inspires you to take photos and record some videos is a lot more important, because at the end of the day, the best camera that you have is the one that's always in your pocket. Now, I want to touch on battery life though, like I always do. Now, this long-term review is a little different because despite the fact that I have used the 15 Pro Max for a while, this device in my hand is brand new. So at the end of the day, the battery life is what I would have expected. It's solid and can last me almost 2 days with light use. But remember when I briefly mentioned overheating at the beginning of this video? Well, take this with a grain of salt, but I find that this 15 Pro Max gets very, very hot when charging. Now, it's not doing that any other time. It's not doing that when I'm playing a game. It's not doing that when I'm scrolling through Twitter or something. It's just doing that while charging. But this isn't something that I've really experienced a bunch with iPhones in the past, especially because 27 watts, while it is fast for an iPhone, isn't necessarily fast by any means. So it is a little concerning, and I am kind of interested as to how that would affect the battery life in the future. But realistically, I probably wouldn't have this phone for that long to be able to actually tell you. But I've been seeing a lot recently on Twitter about people sharing their battery capacities after only 8 months of using this device. And some people are down to the 80s, which is insane because it hasn't even been a full year. Though it is not uncommon for devices to heat up when they are charging. I think that for how hot this thing is getting, it is slightly concerning. But it also could be the beta software that I'm on. So, I don't know. Anyways though, in summary, the 15 Pro Max is solid. I mean, there isn't really much to dislike about the phone unless you just don't really like the iPhone. And while I know where a majority of you watching my channel stand on the iPhone, it is nice doing these revisits because it allows me to stay unbiased. Thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, subscribe for more content, and if you've stayed throughout this entire video, drop an Apple emoji in the comments so I know that you've watched all the way through. All right, peace.